Kia ora te whānau, this is the ALTBAYS show brought to you by ALTBAYS.NZ. We're on a journey coming close to our show 200. It's been a beautiful, amazing journey. We really appreciate having you all following, watching, talking about it, criticizing, which is great, makes us grow. So if you are watching us right now on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the Madhouse TikTok. We're there. We're there. Yes, of course. And our media group also publishes the Coromand magazine. So if you want to know more about the Coromando community, and the cool thing is that we invite people to write for a local magazine, but there is an audio version because obviously accessibility and inclusivity matters. So we have an audio version for the magazine and an online version. And the cool thing is that people from all over the world are reading because it's for everyone. It's people from the Coromando writing for the world, which is cool. So make sure to check that out, Coromand.NZ. We're going to have the cover on our screen because it's a beautiful cover, isn't it? And PIRIHI, thank you so much for supporting our show. If you want a time off in the Coromando, make sure to check them out. PIRIHI.kiwi. They fly Auckland, Whitianga, Great Barrier Island, Waitaya. Is that right, Taylor? I always forget. Yeah. So we're also going to have them on our screen. Shout out to Grant and the beautiful team from PIRIHI for supporting our show. Kia ora. Very special show tonight with my dear friends now, I would say. Yes, it's the start of a cool collaboration, hopefully. We'll see if I don't say too much shit and then Quack is like, I'm out of here! Quack PIRIHI.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
It's like, oh, my first podcast.
Yeah.
I don't have so many cameras. You're used to talking to good crowds usually, right? And so how is the camera vibe for you? It's like
it's fine. I forget that the cameras are here, and it's interesting hearing my voice back because when I make TikToks, I just record it and then post. I don't listen to it.
Do you sing?
No, I don't.
Why was it such a no? Like, whoa, you got a beautiful voice.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm defensive.
You got a beautiful voice.
Thank you. Maybe I'll get into doing the ASMR that we spoke about.
There you go.
Yeah.
Maybe you should.
Yeah.
Very subtle. You would attract new listeners. Can I read a little bit about you before we start?
Go ahead.
I just want to say, I just want to give a shout out to our dear Chloe Potai, who is one of our co-hosts. Dear Chloe put me in touch and told me about Quack, which is amazing. I'm always stoked to meet cool people who are on a beautiful journey in their life. So Chloe, mwah. ALTBAYS whānau loves you. You are a big part of this whānau, as you know. All right, let's do this. Quack PIRIHI. Did I say it right? Yeah. Takatāpui creative and Māori activist. Quack works across various kaupapa, which are principles designed to improve rangatahi Māori, me whānau Māori outcomes, from governance spaces to community roles and advisory groups. Much of Quack's mahi is focused on opening doors for mokopuna, which I found it as definition as, would you say grandchildren?
Yeah, grandchildren, but anyone can be a mokopuna. So you're a mokopuna. So not just focusing on rangatahi or our matua, our parents, focusing on everybody.
Thank you. To stand in their tino rangatiratanga, which is their sovereignty, advocating for themselves, their whānau, hapū, and iwi. Very prolific in their mission, Quack founded Mana Āniwaniwa.
Beautiful.
A kaupapa supporting the Takatāpui and queer liberation movement in Aotearoa alongside whānau. Quack also works as a social impact lead in the Te Pātaka, Kōrero o Takanini, Auckland Council's kaupapa whānau community hub to mitigate inequity within the Takanini Hapori, as well as the wider Tamaki Makoro Hore. What is Hore?
Hore?
R-O-H-E. I don't know if that was something that I got it wrong. Because
rohe.
Rohe.
Rohe, like area, space.
Area.
Yeah.
Learning. Advisor at the Make It 16 campaign, I love that, which seeks to lower the voting age in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Executive board member and secretary at the Auckland Pride, volunteer for Inside Out Koaro, a national charity providing resources, information, workshops, consulting, and support for anything concerning rainbow or LGBTQAI plus issues and education, and also an active artist and content creator. How do you find time in life? Like, do you chill?
I do. I'm listening to you read out these things that I like signed up to over the last couple of years, and I'm like, oh shit, that description needs to be adjusted. But are you
still active with most of the things that like a part of them? Yeah,
with most of them, and like naturally you grow apart from things you signed up to, and you get offered other opportunities that need to be prioritized. But largely I don't relax very often. That's something that I need to get into, is relaxing, taking time for myself, but also understanding the importance of doing these kaupapa. And often that looks like having some sleepless nights or staying up really late doing emails. But yeah, for me, the bigger picture is the health and well-being of our communities, of our hapū, and that tends to take priority sometimes when it shouldn't. I should put myself first, but yes.
Yeah, there's that saying, when you're in the airplane and something goes wrong, you put the mask first, right? You look after yourself first, so you can provide to people. But you correct me if I'm wrong, when you're doing cool things like you are, that's motivation enough to carry on, right? It doesn't feel like a burden. It doesn't feel like something that you're carrying. It's like you seem to be really enjoying everything that you're going for.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think the work that I do sustains me enough to be able to continue the work that I do. What I've realized in the last couple of weeks, really, especially this last weekend following Festival for the Future, is that if we don't do the work, then no one will. And we're either going to drown or die in a fire. Which are obviously really dramatic, but I enjoy doing the work. I have a really good manaki team, a support team around me. And yeah, I love the work that I do.
The one that you mentioned, was it mainly focused on the environment, or it was like a big picture of what's going on in the future, trying to focus on what the youth can do? Can you tell me a little bit about?
Yeah, so Festival for the Future is the biggest innovation leadership conference space in Aotearoa, and it was hosted at Tākina, a new conference centre opened down in Te Whanganui-a-Tara, Wellington. And it was an opportunity for a bunch of youth to come, youth leaders, youth activists, there were politicians, government agencies in the room, for youth to be able to speak to what they believe the future to be, for industry leaders, whether it's in the climate space, whether it's in the digital equity space. And I was on their Mātauranga Māori panel, and I was the youngest on there, maybe not the cheekest. The moderator, Christine Leaf, was pretty cheeky, but I enjoyed just being in that space. I think we talk so much about rangatahi being the future or youth being the future, but often there's not many spaces that cater to setting them up for leading the future. It's just, the youth will do that. The youth will tackle climate change. But yeah, it was a cool opportunity to be immersed in this space.
Something that is special here for us is to bring people with different perspectives, with different points of views. And I'm learning that the hard way, that most people actually want the best for the world in their own ways, which makes it so much more challenging because you disagree with someone, but then you realize that they are human, their cultural background is different, maybe their traumas are very different, and still they want the best for whatever they choose to give priority to. It might be themselves, which I think like most of the people who don't align with our thoughts, they maybe prioritize themselves too much and forget that there are different communities and different groups that think differently. But how is that for you? Because you're so upfront. I love how honest and straight up you are with your swearings. It's just like sometimes the word, it's their word. It has to be. And I won't say that it sounds harsh, but like you're speaking from your heart, can tell. How is that for you? Like to be in spaces that people have different opinions and you still have to sit there and listen to them?
Yeah, I think when we talk about creating spaces, like I said before, creating space in which rangatahi can come in, lead conversations, be the trailblazers, but also be supported by the elders in the room to influence and to create change. It can be very difficult when the very people sitting in the room don't agree with your whakaaro, don't acknowledge your pronouns, or don't see the wider kaupapa. I feel like in the kaupapa Māori space, we often are forced to work in silos because there's so limited funding to be able to connect and like bring a climate change movement and introduce them to like Takatāpui advisory groups or vice versa.
What is it, Takatāpui advisory?
Oh, so Takatāpui is the kupu Māori.
Is the one that I read.
Yeah, Takatāpui is the kupu Māori, which historically was used to describe a relationship between two people of the same sex, but now with rangatahi Māori and many other Māori navigating their takatāpuitanga, it's turned into this overarching umbrella of fluidity with gender, fluidity with sexuality, and so much more. It is not the like translation of queer and Māori. It's a lot more than that. But yes, we'll talk about that later. It's fascinating and it's frustrating when you have like transphobes. Oh,
no, you're good.
First time doing a podcast.
First time.
It's
great.
It's struggling when you're having assholes in the room with you and you're just trying to initiate change. I feel like old people, they have a certain agenda, and when they come into their room, they assume that the young people don't know better. They assume that the young people don't know what the fuck they're talking about. But if they listen to what we're trying to ask for, the survival of our planet, the survival of our communities, I think they'll realize there's more than just protests that are going on. We're trying to influence systematic and intergenerational change for our people.
And I feel like the important thing there is because like you have a big online presence, and nowadays it seems to be the thing that everybody's focusing on. But I'll tell you a cool story. I met this lady on the weekends. She's a Jehovah's Witnesses leader. I don't know if there's if leader is not the name, but like someone who is studying and taking seriously. And although I'm not religious, and I can highly criticize some religions, like I listen to them, and she was like, "Oh, we don't force people, we don't go after them." But then I joked, I was like, "But what about knocking on people's doors, you know?" But then, as we talked, I realized that regardless of what you're going for, it's a great personal approach because there's nothing like face to face, right? So, and she was honest. She was like, "If the person is not interested, I carry on, but I want this. I want the eye contact." So I feel like when you do what you just did and you are doing of putting yourself out there, going to spaces and talking to those people, it's easier to create some empathy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there's moments where the people in the room just need to shut up. But there are definitely moments when talking in person is better, whether you're not. There's so much anger and frustration that comes with movements, and especially movements that are designed to challenge the very foundation of privilege that this country was built off. And so when you're having these hearty conversations online, it can be so easy to disregard it and say, "Oh, they're being aggressive, they can shut up, they don't know what they're talking about, they don't have a degree, blah, blah, blah." But when you're in the room with somebody and you're able to view them as a person with their unique experiences, maybe they've overcompensated because they've had one particular experience years and years ago, which has defined the entire movement and dedication to these kaupapa. But it's a lot more human. I think it's not a natural way of working with people without expecting that person contact. Kanohi ki te kanohi is what we call it in te ao Māori, face to face. I'm able to see you, your eyes, your body language, your eye rolls, your swearing, your mumbling, and you just can't quite get that if you're working online or digitally.
Do you feel more challenged, or you think it's harder to have conversations with the everyday people, like with the older people that hold on to old ways of seeing life, or leaders that you disagree with their perspective? Because politicians are trained, they can bend you and change the subject and just take a different tangent and take all the time that you were supposed to have a conversation. They take it. So what's more challenging there? It's
super fucking frustrating talking with politicians or talking with people in that have high
10
positions.
10 years later, he becomes a politician and come back here. I'm like, what is...
It's super fucking frustrating because they have these quick responses. They have these ways of not even answering the question, just walking around this fucking spot. But on the other hand, talking with everyday people is really valuable, and that's how we change minds. But for people that work in this space, they'll resonate with the fact that we just don't have time. If we're going to go out and have these hard conversations, it needs to be with the people at the top. I don't have the energy to go metaphorically door knocking to everyone to listen to their transphobia or Māori phobia. I hate calling it phobia, by the way. It's not a medical condition. You're just fucked. But I hate listening to people's bullshit and hate And if I'm going to have to put myself through that, listen to the policy or decision makers that are enacting these practices, then I'd rather go straight to the top. Our planet's dying. I don't have time to go door knocking. We need to go straight to the top.
Cool.
Boom. Cut.
Boom. There's a clip.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. How young people calling you young now. Okay. I'm young too. We had a get. I think it was MC Tali a couple of weeks ago, and she was saying how it's easier to understand when you look at the big picture, that like a lot of young people, they see how the world is turning into shit, and that motivates them to do more. But at the same time, you're gonna have the other kids who will do like, fuck this,
I'm out.
It's fucked.
Yeah,
I'm out. I don't care. Is that part of your mission to try to bring those ones and say, hey, by doing your part or a little bit, or you're not in that space, you're just focusing on like, no, this is me and I'm doing it.
I think we can't acknowledge, like, especially when we're talking about rangatahi. So many leaders, like I said before, are wanting the rangatahi to lead these huge, heavy movements about climate change or justice or education. But in reality, there are so many rangatahi, especially that live in poverty, that have grown up around violence, that grow up in cold, damp homes. I'm not going to expect them to go talk to the big policy decision makers. If they want to, absolutely. I'll encourage them to stand in their tino rangatiratanga and their sovereignty, or in their kaitiakitanga and their protecting or guardianship. But I've worked with youth that have just grown up in the most horrible environments. The fact that they're still here with us, they're still breathing, even if they're at home vaping, playing video games all day, that still means that they're here. And when they're ready to connect back to their taha Māori, to their Māori culture, or if they want to get involved in activism or fucking politics, then that's up to them to decide. And like we spoke about before in the cafe, you can't have too many chiefs in the kitchen. You can't have heaps of ringleaders leading their own movements. We need to be collected as a collective. We need to be leading the work together instead of all these silos.
You're so connected with your, well, it's whakapapa, right? With your heritage, with who you are, with who your family is. Did you get that from your family, or that was a decision that you took for yourself? Like how is Quack's upbringing?
Yeah, so I grew up in Pamua, which is East Auckland. Panmure. If you're Māori, you'll get that. That's a little inside joke. But I grew up in Pamua with my mum and my four siblings. I'm the youngest of fucking, how many of this? There's 6. I think there's 6. The oldest one's like 40 something. Got kids, all the good stuff. But my dad was very absent. He still is fucking absent. Didn't even get me a birthday present. Shit.
Come on, man.
Come on, Dad. But yeah, so I grew up with my mum. Went to a not a goodish primary school, and just grew up with my mum and my twin sister. And the only time,
te reo at school?
No, my mum was white. I did learn a tiny bit of te reo during primary school, but that was just counting to 10 colours, different kupu, ho, new words here and there. But the only time I would go back up north where I'm from was for funerals. Because my dad was so absent, he didn't really know how to connect with me. So every time I would go up, I'd sort of just, it felt like not a halfway house. I felt like I was just at a motel. And I'd go to the marae, go to the tangi, meet my whānau, and then come back home and have this completely separate life outside of te ao Māori. And so when I speak of being connected to my whakapapa, I'm very much not. I know where I'm from. I know where my ancestry lies. But with the current relationship that I have with my dad, I don't feel comfortable to go back up home and chill and do mahi. And as an urban Māori, as some would say, a Māori growing up in the city, my connection to my taha Māori has been through language and through waiata instead of whānau connections. And with the platform that I've had so many of my whanaunga, so many of my relatives reach out and be like, oh my God, you're Quack, I'm your cousin from blah, blah, blah. And that's been really interesting, really challenging, and really, I don't know, it's upsetting, it's conflicting, because I know exactly where I'm from. I know where my marae are. I know where my whenua is. But when we put that into real world practice, I don't have time to go up north from doing all these things. Or maybe as I'm saying it out loud, I'm realizing that it's not a huge priority for me right now because I don't have that strong connection. So when we unpack all the bullshit of the trauma and the absent dad and all the resentment, yeah, it's real interesting. And it's different for each Māori, because my connection to my Māoritanga is very unique, and I don't think it's similar to anyone else's out there.
It's interesting the way you say, like, it's not the time, like having this awareness of how life is, and like the time will come, you know, for you to go back and unpack. I have something similar. Like I've been here for 10 years, and it never sparked me to actually go back to Brazil and do some research on my family and find out what's going on and where I come from. But the more I understand Maori culture, and the more I talk to my Maori friends, and I see how sacred and how important it is to know where you're from. Now that I'm going back for a trip, I'm like, oh, it's time to get to my grandparents while they are alive, just two of them that are still alive, and have a chat and try to understand a little bit more about myself, because it probably means a lot of what I am now, right? So it's nice that you have this idea of like how the journey works. Like no one knows, but like you know that the time will come for that connection to be made. Do you talk to Dad? You said that there's no.
Yes, sometimes.
Yeah,
he calls me every now and again, but it's not the strong relationship. I see. Oh no, that's a bit harsh. I won't say that, but I see him as someone who has linked me to my ancestry, to my ancestors, and I've had good moments. I've had shit moments. I've had times where he didn't reach out to me for birthdays, or I'd be left as a kid at home and he wouldn't turn up to birthday parties when he said he was going to pick us up and all that bullshit. But I think at the crux for me right now, what's more important is continuing the mahi, staying connected with my siblings, even if we don't agree with everything that we're all doing. That's more important to me. And especially if we add in like the element of being takatāpui or being queer, a lot of us don't have the luxury of being hyper connected with our parents. We've been ousted, we've been kicked out of our families for our sexuality, our fluidity, our gender, and so we develop these things called chosen whānau, chosen families. And I have many people who I consider maternal figures, or who I consider brothers and sisters or cousins, that aren't connected to me by blood, and those are the people that help sustain me, in lieu of having a decent fucking dad.
Here you go, Dad.
Yeah,
that's for you, man. Come on, bro. Missing out here, man.
But then on the other hand, I think with my mum and my upbringing with my mum and my dad, I think that they did the best that they could with the cards that they were played. And so it's like a balance of being hoha at you, wanting you to be a better parent, but also understanding, okay, you were the eldest, you had all this pressure. Yeah, doesn't make it okay, but it provides an explanation and sets the scene.
It feels, for me, when I detached from the place where I grew up, and then I went through some challenging situations overseas, now when I look back, I realize how strong they made me, and it changed a lot of my perception of what I was holding on to. So when it comes to the whole gender thing, for me it's easy. It's like, we are these weird living, walking things in this weird world that is just floating, and like, who the fuck cares? Like, what's wrong with us? But that's my thing, because I understand that for a lot of people, it's a safe place to hold on to things that you learned when you were a child, especially if you have a privileged life. If you have a good life, man, if you have 3 meals in a warm bed, you're already like, whoa, all the way so at the top. So holding on to all those things, it's easy, it's comfortable. So instead of criticizing, I'm trying to find ways to support the cause, and it's like, how can we have these conversations to explain to people that, like, there's nothing to do with you. Like, stop bringing the problem to yourself. Like, why are you making other people's lives harder? Can't you just sit there in the corner and live your privileged life?
Yeah.
And right? But you mentioned trauma just before, and this is something that I hear quite often from the extreme right, or not, sometimes not even extreme right, because there's people from all political spectrums not understanding the gender thing. So what upsets you the most in this talk? Like, what for you is the hardest to listen from people who are not supportive or don't even make an effort?
I think this conversation could go so many different ways now. I think the biggest, most frustrating challenge that I have is people who aren't queer wanting to keep circling around this idea of not understanding what it is. I know so many things exist in our real, whether it's science, whether it's how the fucking plane works that I just flew on. But me not understanding it, I don't care. It's not a huge deal for me. And so when we think of kids growing up, when we bring very real statistics of suicide and mental health distress and abuse, using violence, using drugs, using alcohol, I don't see why that isn't enough just to be like, okay, I don't understand it, but let's move on. Let's create healthy balances of life. Let's improve the well-being of these people. And that's never aligned with the kōrero that they have about wanting rangatahi to be our future. These political leaders insist that rangatahi are going to be our future, but at the same time won't improve the outcomes that koe o Takatāpui youth are growing up in. They won't make an effort to listen. They'll actively just pick up this misinformation. Like we saw Brian Tamaki just a couple of days ago insist that puberty blockers were being sold at the warehouse when they're fucking not. And so picking up this misinformation, I think it's hoha when adults insist on having conversations or wanting to keep having whānau or learning sessions about what these identities are. And they should just shut up and listen and do what the youth are asking them to do, the bare fucking minimum.
When it comes to the puberty blockers and more of like the health side of things, who do you go after to learn more, and what would you recommend the young people who are living these situations in life? Like, what is the whakapapa? Like, what is the kōrero for people to seek like real, legit information?
Queer organisations, queer and Takatāpui-led organisations. We've got Rainbow Youth, we've got Inside Out, Outline, Gender Minorities, we've got Auckland Pride, which we got different Pride places, Dunedin Pride, Wellington Pride. But queer organisations have invested the money in advisory groups, learning directly from youth. Often they have like ongoing advisory groups that help guide where the organisation is going. Rainbow Youth is a youth-led organisation, youth-led membership, and they've got all these beautiful resources, whether you're a questioning rangatahi wanting to know more about how to wear a binder or how to use pronouns or what to do if you're going to a pōwhiri on a marae. There's so many resources out there. And if we keep continuing to expect everyday rangatahi, like myself, like queer rangatahi, to explain their identity or how to best support them, that's all good and well, but it creates a system where you refuse to learn and you refuse to grow, and you're expecting that emotional labour from the very people that have had to liberate themselves within their own houses, liberate themselves within their own families. And so, yeah, I lean on queer organisations and I work with youth. I listen to youth. It might not always be accurate. It might not be steeped in academia or what these universities, PhD students have spent so long learning about. But yeah, queer organisations all the way.
One thing that I hear often, and I won't say that I agree, but I understand where people are coming from, it's when they say that, but why labeling more? Why keeping like the LGBTQ, like how long are we going for? You know, like, so what is the argument against with someone with such a sharp and, you know, like opinion? Because at the end of the day, I understand that sometimes when you start to put a lot of determined, like, it's the same with ADHD, or like when someone comes to a classroom, when the schooling system is already fucked, and instead of acknowledging that the schooling system is not helping those kids, you start to put a lot of like, but this kid is not, they got this, they got that. So what's the talk when someone comes with something like that and saying, well, can't you just be whoever you are? And when do the labels support someone to understand themselves? And
I think there are there are two main conversations that come off of having labels. One of them is if we put these like blind glasses on and say you can be who you are, you don't need labels, you don't need all these things, and you tell that to youth who are navigating these very sometimes distressing spaces in their life, you're almost gaslighting them into believing that there's no hate in the world. So if I tell a rangatahi, you can be who you want, I think when you put into perspective all the homophobia that they grow up around, all the transphobia, all the snarky comments in primary school, do you have a girlfriend yet? And these kids are fucking young. And all these heteronormative societal conditions that they grow up in. And when you tell them that they're just allowed to be who they are, it sort of gaslights you. And it's like, were those experiences that I had not real? Were those side comments from teachers, from youth, all these heteronormative expectations, like I said before, were they not real? And then the other part of the conversation is, as Māori, we're Māori before anything else. We're a descendant of, I'm a descendant of Ngāpuhi, of Ngāti Wai, of Ngāti Whātua Kaipara, of Ngāti Poro, before I am Quack. When we introduce ourselves in our pepeha, often we go through our landmarks, our maunga, our awa, our moana, our waka, how we got to Aotearoa, and then we introduce our name. And so by having this very individualized approach to having labels, it can sometimes be a good thing. It can provide a safe space. You can see people who look like you, who have had similar experiences to you. But I would say that what's a lot more important is finding people that respect you and that love you, and that is a lot of the time found within those labels, within the queer community, transgender community, within the neurodiverse, ADHD community. And I think a lot of the time people can like weaponize that conversation. And what we're trying to create is our revolutions, te tiriti justice. And within that, I think in the last couple of years, I've cared a lot less about people using my pronouns and a lot more about whether they're going to vote for a political party that is going to help our people or whether they're going to fuck us over. But yeah, everyone's on different stages in their hiding. For me, labels aren't too much of a big thing. It can be a place of understanding, a place of comfort, a place of identity for me and my people. But I care much more about the bigger picture in these spaces.
Do you go by they?
Yeah, they them pronouns. In Te Reo Māori, we have some gendered words like big brother, big sister, little sister. We have papa and mama, which are traditionally tied to gender, of course. And we have one pronoun ia, and it refers to where somebody is, ia. But in a Pākehā context, I don't feel like a man or a woman. I feel myself swimming between the two. Some days I wake up and I want to wear a skirt and a crop top and have my long hair and have this very like niche understanding of what it is to be a female or have femininity. But a lot of the time I'm just swimming between the two.
I love this conversation, man, because the thing is, when you talk to men who identify as men, it kind of comes naturally to make fun of all the rest, you know, because man has this thing of power, you know, like I'm the man, I'm the alpha, you know, even if you don't have the attitude, you know, there's this thing with being, you know, I'm the macho. And then the feminine side stays out of the equation. So for me, I love asking about that. I'm like, how is your feminine side? You know, because it's provocative, but like it's undeniable. Because you came from a woman, you know, like that there's from a mother, from you were born. So like there's a connection to the feminine, all of us, in all of us. It's just how you tap into it and how you perceive it. It's meant to make us much stronger and sensitive and pay attention to what's going on around us. So for me, every time that I'm having a conversation with a guy and I see that things start to go like, I'm like, man, I think you're not in touch with your feminine side enough, you know, because it's easy to poke on the minority or whatever, but like when you put someone in check, at least you force like a thought or something, you know, like so for me, it's been my mission. I'm like, man, the more I tap into my feminine side, the more I connect with Wahine, the more like we do work together, I feel like, wow, it makes much more sense. It makes everything lighter. You know, all the work that we're doing, it makes much more sense when you're tapping into within, not just trying to find external things. How do you find it? Like going and like understanding, like, because for you it sounds very natural. Has it been natural from the beginning? Oh, I'm tapping on my feminine side more, like I'm tapping on my masculine side. I'm just going like you put in the work. I can see. Was it confronting at the start?
I don't know. I don't view masculinity or femininity as like two separate binary things where I think about, what does it mean to be masculine? I don't view it as being like this macho maybe going to the gym, whatever the heteronormative understanding of what it is to be masculinity, to be masculine or feminine. I think when you ask me, I viewed masculinity as being your foundation, as being your strength, as being in your maunga and your heavy waters, your ocean swells and your thunderstorms, and then femininity maybe being your calm, gentle lakes and the plants that sustain the birds and the animals in the forest. But I think maybe in that self there's like Pākehā views on what it is to be a female or woman, of male, feminine being like very calm, very quiet, and masculine being like boom in your face. I think a lot of the reason why men don't tap into their femininity is because they see how females are treated and they don't want a bar of it. And it's always funny. I always ask them, why don't you wear crop tops? Why don't you wear skirts? Why don't you paint your nails? And then they might use like F slurs, or they might say, oh, I'm not a faggot, I'm not gay, I'm not a pussy. And then you start to unpack and realize why they don't want to be associated with the people that have been marginalized since the beginning of time. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about what it is to be a woman, because it's two male presenting people. That's not our fucking place. There are already people doing the work. But my personal experience with like femininity and masculinity, I think it's been put on the back burner for a long time, ever since I started doing this kaupapa Māori work. I've realized that my connection in relation to the environment and the wider collective is so much more important than, maybe it's not important, maybe it's equal. I've just prioritized the former for so much longer. But in the work that I do, working in the public sector, I don't think I'm able to wear crop tops or skirts or paint my nails or do those type of things. I'm being told one thing, but on the other page, we're seeing fucking horrible people like Posie Parker walk around the planet and demand the outlawing of our community. So it's so much more safer for me to be I don't know what people expect me to be in a presenting.
Were you at the protest?
No, I wasn't. What was I doing? I was in Jamaica.
Jamaica.
I was protesting the environment.
I want to talk about Jamaica, but the protest, wow, it brought so much attention and so much hate to the forefront, which is upsetting. What did you find? How did you find the both sides of the story?
Well, we've seen Posie Parker's conversation amplified for a very, very long time, especially the internet. They refer to this like hidden majority. They refer to the fact that like the Aotearoa hates trans people, and there's a silent majority that are too scared to stand up or do things. And you see that like real radical right wing community. When you give one of their leaders a platform, then they all come out. I don't really care for Posie Parker. It was eye-opening to be reaffirmed that the political leaders in this country, unless they're in like Te Pāti Māori or the Greens, they don't care about the safety of queer people. They haven't done anything radical, besides obviously banning the conversion therapy in Aotearoa a couple of years ago. But there's not much hati mahi that politicians care about unless it impacts them and people's understandings of them. But yeah, it was bullshit. It's always going to be bullshit. TERFs or transphobes getting a platform. I wonder how we can have conversations and how we can change minds instead of us having to resort to protests or us having to resort to activists. How do we create that intergenerational change? Why are rangatahi always having to put themselves on the front line to change things? Why can't we just be youths? Like, we're born to be kaitiaki, sure. We're born to be protectors of the environment and our people. But fuck, sometimes we just want to be youth. I don't want to have to end up at a protest. But then the flip side of that is how privileged you are to be able to go to a protest freely in other countries where that's not the case. So it's a conflicting conversation again.
And then there's the thing with how to respond as well. Because an argument that I heard a lot of times was like, they were right to protest, but then it got violent. And I'm like, well, when you are in a heated situation, and you've been oppressed for years, it's very hard to be a saint, like it's very hard. I'm not saying that responding violently is the best response, but at the same time, once someone it's poking you for years and the people close to you and killing your peers, right? That's the main thing. it's very hard, and you know, you need a lot of mental, you know, like balance, and you got to be in the right space to do that in a different way. But again, if someone is steering, it's hard to be calm.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think the expectation that we have to be calm and palatable and consumable to make these changes is fucked up in itself. Like, my tone or the swear words that I use shouldn't be the thing that you focus on. It's the things that we're talking about. And like, I'm sure many Māori experience this when we're wanting to advocate for like systematic change or just the bare minimum, like honouring Te Tiriti, the founding document of this country. We get told that we're too loud, we're savages, we're doing X, Y, Z, which is marginally worse for our people of darker skin colour, unlike myself. But then the other half of that is just the media's talking bullshit, the media's lying, and the right wing, I don't want to call them a community, the right wing assholes just weaponize what very little media control that they do have, claiming that it was violent, that there were fights that queer people were initiating or instigating X, Y, Z. But yeah, bigger things to worry about.
When you talk about the political parties, are you affiliated to any?
I'm not officially. I mean, I'm Te Pāti Māori hard, and I support Te Pāti Māori as well as the Greens. For in the past couple, maybe not months, in the past couple years, I think I've realised more to align myself with a political party that represents a majority of my views instead of trying to align with one that ticks every box. On the other hand, there's some beautiful work that is being done. The ACT Party have done various support pieces for rangatahi growing up in state care. Obviously, as a whole, I don't like the ACT Party. Labour helped to pass their banning conversion therapy bill, which I support fundamentally, but as a party, they're not doing enough for the environment. And so, yeah, beggars can't be choosers, and I really love the movement that Te Pāti Māori has grown, as well as the Greens. I love to see unapologetic Māoriness. I love to see unapologetic advocacy, not following the rules. I'm very cheeky. I'm a rule breaker. Rules are there to be broken. And yeah, so as a whole, Te Pāti Māori is, I guess, who I'd affiliate with them. I've got one of their, like, you know the Crocs, how you can get like gibbets to go on your Crocs? Yeah. I've got a Te Pāti Māori Croc gibbet, which I don't know. Is that an official affiliation with the party by having a Croc gibbet?
You're walking with them. You're walking with them. That's for sure. But I feel like what you're saying, it's what most politicians should be doing, acknowledging the others. I feel like Taylor was telling me the other day, man, have you ever stopped to watch one of those the Parliament things? It's a shit show. You know, like, it's a shit show. It's ridiculous. Like it's oh, but you said that. Oh, but you said that. Like, there's never oh, good job. That's cool. We actually agree with that. How can we make that more viable to the population? You know, like, because they are working for us. They are our employees at the end of the day, right? And then imagine you come to your company and it's a fucking freaking jungle, people jumping on each other's necks. Like, where's the peace? Where's the solid conversation of like, these ideas are good. How can we implement this together? But then it becomes a power thing, right?
Yeah, and then I think when we think about like Te Pāti Māori not being a very popular party, not in society, but in government itself, they're always challenging, they're always saying, no, you need to be unapologetically pro Te Tiriti o Waitangi, expecting the people who have been ousted for so many fucking years to be kind and to support the other political parties, which are actively trying to hurt their people, which are actively trying to undo the human rights movement that has existed in Aotearoa for so long. I think then we start to get into that tone policing mind again, where in order for you to be able to listen to a Māori, they have to be calm, they have to be quiet, they have to pronounce all their fucking languages properly, they need to actively translate their te reo Māori. And I think if you're a politician, you should be there to do the fucking work. I don't care for your praise, you're paid enough. Yeah, there's so much more than just pats on the back, like let's create a revolution, let's free our people.
How do we get the Maori party to become, I don't know if popular is the word, but like for more people to actually take it seriously? Because when I understand what Maori people want for the whole nation, it makes much more sense to me. It's a nice view of how a country should be run. I don't believe, I don't even believe in countries and all that shit. For me, it's just a bunch of, you know what I mean? Yeah, like the whole patriotism and like the imaginary lines. Like you see Africa and it's nonsense. It's like these straight lines, you know, like this is ours, it's Italy. So I'm very skeptical when it comes to countries, but I understand what we are and what we're living right now in the world. So we need to work together. So what do you see as good actions that, you know, as someone young coming fresh of like, oh yeah, this could be implemented, or like we can work more on this to make it people understand that it's actually working for the best of everybody?
I think the fundamental reason why Te Pāti Māori is inherently the best political party is that they understand that what works for Māori works for all. We spoke about holistical approaches to health, to liberation within the justice sector. We spoke about holistic education practices. Te Pāti Māori fundamentally understand that what works for Māori will work for all. Te Pāti Māori isn't, they're pro-Māori in the sense where they're trying to support and amplify and give mana to what Māori communities want, to what our iwi, hapū and whānau destined for us, for what Te Tiriti promised us. But that doesn't mean that they're anti-white. They're trying to support all in Aotearoa through a Māori way of thinking, through Māori health models. And when Pākehā get over their white fragility and understand that that's what they're trying to do, they're not trying to get all Pākehā sent back to England and get all our whenua back. We just want to be a kaitiaki of the land that we were born to be a kaitiaki of. But yeah, I love Te Pāti Māori. I love the Greens, their Te Tiriti approach, the way they engage with community. I've never seen National Party at a community hui. They host their own little fucking conversations in white areas like Remuera up in Tāmaki Makoto. But they're never the ones talking to gangs wanting to help bring justice or bring well-being to their communities. They're always just on the defense, on the attack, because they can never win a fucking government at an election.
And how poorly they choose the candidates and the leaders. They look like villains. Like, how are you gonna get young people involved if you cannot even speak their language, if you cannot even relate to them?
And I think it makes sense why those types of leaders don't want to like make 16-year-olds have the ability to vote, because they know that they don't have strong youth connections. They might be on TikTok, they might know how to hold a camera and make a video, but they don't know how to connect with our communities. Unless these kids that they're connecting with are privileged, have money, come from national backgrounds, fucking have businesses in their family. The people that I'd much rather spend time connecting with are the ones who need extra support, are rangatahi Māori, are rangatahi that are queer. I couldn't care less for the ones that are privileged and already have resources to be able to live their whatever destiny they choose for themselves.
One thing is to get the age lower to 16, and another thing is to guide and to get those kids to understand the importance of voting. Do you feel like the making it 16 is doing a good job focusing on that? Well, you are part of it, so obviously, but you know what I mean? Like, for me, because I work at the school, so I see that, I see brilliant minds, young ass, and I'm like, yeah, everyone deserves a vote, and these ones would probably make a great deal out of their votes. These ones as well, but we need better conversations with them so they understand the importance of the vote. How is the work to that part to get people, because that goes with adults. A lot of adults don't care about voting. Like they don't understand their voice. That's why I love Hori videos that he talks about the role, the Māori role. So how is the work with young minds for them to understand the importance of ticking a box there and voting? Yeah,
I don't think it should be this or that. Make it 16. The team and rangatahi in general supporting the campaign, not only in Aotearoa but also around the world. They've done a really good job at explaining exactly why rangatahi should be able to have the vote. In Aotearoa, our specific reason is that we have laws in place that don't allow you to discriminate on anybody 16 and above. That includes voting, and the Supreme Court ruling this last Māori year, let's put it as that, confirmed that rangatahi shouldn't have to, in our particular case in Aotearoa, they shouldn't have to give any more reason besides the fact that it's discrimination I know so many more adults that don't give a fuck about voting, that don't vote for like full stop, that aren't politically engaged. And we can have a conversation there about whether everyone needs to be, or whether someone from a minority, you should also expect them to be politically active when they've already survived so many systems that are set up to fuck them over. But rangatahi, specifically within the Make It 16 Aotearoa campaign, have done a beautiful job at enabling youth to understand why their voice is important. It's our future that we're going to be inheriting. And it shouldn't just be the old pale, stale male that ends up deciding who runs the country. Rangatahi now are more politically... no, we've always been politically active, but they're the ones organising protests. They're the ones turning up to kaupapa community events. They care more about the community than I think these elder generations do. And like when we've got to spend the next 50, 60, 70 years of our life living here, we're going to care a lot more than someone who's old, rich, and is going to fucking die in 5 years. But yeah, rangatahi should absolutely be given a voice in Parliament. They should be able to vote.
Did you hear that? I agree. We have a beautiful article on the Koaro Mind magazine that talks about that and gives examples of countries who are doing it. It's a no-brainer.
No-brainer.
Hey.
Yeah, full stop.
God damn, kids, come on. Man, tell me about Jamaica.
Jamaica was a opportunity for me to travel with a group of Pacific delegates with Greenpeace Aotearoa in order to hold space and for Greenpeace to power share the platform that they've had. Greenpeace is an organisation fundamentally protecting our planet, our waters, with different movements like a global plastics treaty, an oceans treaty. They're wanting to they're advocating for the ocean, for Pacific people to share their voices. And so we travelled all the way to Jamaica, where a thing called an ISA is the International Seabed Authority. And there's like a technical sentence which explains exactly what they're meant to do. But essentially they're just a group of people that are in charge of protecting the resources, the minerals that are in the deep seas. And what we travelled there to do was hold space as Pacific delegates to share kōrero, to speak directly to the people that are going to be impacting these changes. But what I ended up doing, which was a bit exciting, was we took action in front of a research deep sea mining vessel called James Cook. Yeah, fuck James Cook. So we jumped in front of the ship with the tino rangatiratanga flag, the flag that represents Māori sovereignty, which I found out some of my relatives actually helped design like a couple of decades ago, which is fucking cool.
Awesome. But
we waved the tino rangatiratanga flag in front, in the face of the colonizer, as well as a banner that read "Stop Deep Sea Mining" or "Ban Deep Sea Mining." I forget which one it was. My beautiful friend Hemi Hita, a Greenpeace activist, Greenpeace campaigner. But yeah, it was beautiful to connect with other Pacific delegates who have shared understanding, who frame the protection of the planet around their ancestral stories and where they've come from as people. A lot of the time it can be really difficult to get involved in activism, specifically environmental activism, because there are all these technical things that you may need to understand, what they're actually mining at the bottom of the water, saving trees, and then when you have a generation of rangatahi that just want to be able to survive, sometimes it can be too hard to get involved. But yeah, it was wild. It was wild.
Oh, that picture of that massive... Taylor, if you don't mind, I think I sent you on your... I sent you a link that has a picture, if you don't mind having a look. It says a lot because it's a poetic representation of what the big man is, but what resistance means as well, right? So I guess in that moment... looking at that huge thing with the James Cook written in it, you won't forget the moment. That felt pretty powerful.
Yeah, fuck. It was scary, and I think we could focus on like the, oh my god, you jumped in front of a ship, but the kōrero I really want to speak about is the fact that this coming July, decision makers will get to decide essentially whether deep sea mining will become a thing in Aotearoa. Up to 30% of the world's oceans could be absolutely destroyed forever. This is modern day colonization. This is neo-colonialism.
What is their side of the story of saying that it has to be done? Did you get into those details as well?
So there's conversations from big industries, and a lot of these industries and huge companies that are wanting to mine the deep sea, that are wanting to get their huge ships to destroy our fucking planet and our ancestral waters. So many of them have been dropping out over the past couple months, over the past couple years, because of pressure from organizations like Greenpeace. And so I just want to reiterate that there's not this huge, strong industry. There are some people who are still wanting to do the work. Their claim is they want to gain resources. I think they're called nodules at the bottom of the ocean, in order to create things like hospital equipment for use in hospital, things that are used to create electric vehicles, which is all bullshit. They no longer use whatever materials that's at the bottom of the ocean to create electric vehicles. But yeah, I don't know. They just want to make money. They're telling investors one thing: you're going to get rich, you're going to get super famous. But then they tell the planet, well, this is this revolutionary science. We can mine the ocean sustainably, which we know to be false.
When you talk to the people who understand the scientists and understand the environmental thing, they will always say that we already have resources enough to continue a society. Well, this society is a bit fucked with consumerism and all that stuff, so maybe that could be a good practice. Oh, that one is amazing. It's a great picture, man.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Fucking scary.
It's scary, but it's such a... I already signed the petition, Taylor. Yes, I already did yesterday, so you can go in your computer. Put that maybe next time, Taylor, and then we'll do that properly with the ALTBAYS login, but I did my personal one. Yeah. So, who is that? I'm sorry.
She was another campaigner who once again took action alongside myself and Hear Me.
Incredible.
And yes, they know the deep
attached to the
with the James Cook in the background.
Yeah.
Fucking beautiful. And see that person at the top there. There are scientists on the ship who are waving out at us, and there are some conversations to be had about that, where these scientists are going on board. They might not necessarily fundamentally believe in deep sea mining, but they're trying to gather research in order to help our effort. But on my point of view, there are these scientists who are enabling these industries in order to start deep sea mining. They're waving at me, trying to be happy. And I felt really conflicted, because a human wanting to wave, but also the ship in itself, the movement, represents the potential destruction of our planet. And I was so privileged to be able to do that with my beautiful friend Hear Me.
Man, there's that story of the people who were when the Nazis did their thing. You know, like they interviewed a lot of the soldiers, the people who were lower in the power hierarchy, and they were doing what they were told. You know, so that's one of those sad things that we always have to remember. That like a lot of the people they're doing the job that they're told, you know, they're feeding the family. So that's why doing what you're doing brings awareness and actually explains the big picture. Because if you get those people to understand what they're actually causing, that's when changes happen, right? So it's challenging. I get, you like, why are you waving at me? Come on, man, jump here and help me. But yeah, it's part of the work. And with the scientists that say, we already have alternatives for most of the things there. So I see your frustration when it comes to like, we don't have to do this anymore. Why do we carry on damaging the environment? How is the relationship with Greenpeace? Are they pretty active in New Zealand? Like, do you have a good relationship with them? Is good Koaro?
Yeah, so Greenpeace, their name for the organization is Greenpeace Aotearoa, which is wild to think that having Aotearoa as your name instead of New Zealand is controversial, but in today's day and age it is. So Greenpeace Aotearoa is a beautiful organization. They do work in different kaupapa. All the Greenpeace offices are interconnected around the world. And He Mihita is the relationship holder, is the person who holds that relationship with the Pacific delegates. And like physically going on the trip, I felt understood. I had familiar faces. I had people that were Māori on the ship with us. They understood our struggle. And so I felt comfortable. I understand that sometimes environmentalism can be quite a white industry, which is good. We need people doing the mahi. Well, no, it's good. That's subjective, but we need people doing the mahi, and whoever it is, it needs to get done. But the fact that Greenpeace Aotearoa shared that power on such a large, huge way in order for Pacific delegates to tell their stories. And all the media interviews and shit like that afterwards, I had full control of what I wanted to talk about. I was able to shit on political parties who weren't doing enough, which like it can be, I don't know, it was huge. I get a little bit upset every time I think about Jamaica because it was such a heavy kaupapa. I was talking with people that were faced with the destruction of their way of life, where their islands would be washed away with climate change and with the climate crisis, and it was so heavy. I don't think I was prepared enough for what exactly I was stepping into, but it was a beautiful opportunity, and we must continue to advocate for the moana, for our Pacific ancestral stories.
Were you expecting the lifestyle that you came across because you went to a poorer part of the country? Is that right?
Yeah, so I wasn't actually on land for very long. We stayed on the ship most of the time. And as someone who grew up in Pamua in East Auckland with not the best whare, like I had mold on all of my windowsills. I was often cold in winter times. It was quite wild to, in itself, just be offered the opportunity to leave Aotearoa to go advocate on behalf of your whenua, your ancestral waters. So that was cool. That was a cool experience. We didn't stay in Jamaica very long. I understand they have a different way of life. We met some youth activists who are doing the heavy mahi over in Jamaica with the ASA. And yeah, I don't think their way of life or their culture or their socioeconomic backgrounds had much impact on me at all. I was much rather focused on building relationships with those rangatahi, with community members. I don't care if you're rich, if you're poor. We should all be advocating for our environment, right? And that's what I was really focused on.
It frustrates me. Criminality levels increasing in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, New Zealand. It's just, in my mind, it just doesn't make sense. Small country, progressive compared to others, very progressive, and it frustrates me deeply to see violence numbers but it's a snowball effect, right? How is the preparation for you to deal with families in need and kids doing the thing? Like, do you just go and do the work, or?
Yeah, I think it's going to be different for any other community worker depending on where they're working. I work up in Tāmaki Makaurau, which has a very unique placing. Obviously in Aotearoa, different relationship with police, different relationship with healthcare providers. We've just had COVID-19, which is still here, wiping out our people. There's so much misinformation on the rise. There's so much frustration, confusion, and all these other factors and elements coming into play. It doesn't help that we have political parties that are wanting to increase wanting to what's the opposite? Decrease the bar of what it means to be a criminal. We're having political leaders frame Māori, frame whānau in the Pacific, whānau from the Pacific, whānau living in South Auckland as criminals just by being people who live in South Auckland. I think it's bullshit. It's confusing for our rangatahi. You claim to be supporting us. You claim to be making decisions on our behalf. But we saw the National Party the other day wanting to put into effect warrantless searches. So police won't need a warrant in order to search you or your whare.
That's how it starts.
That's fucked up. That's how it starts. And that's when we see that Pākehā control. That's when we see Te Tiriti starting to be not just not honoured, but disregarded completely. And it's a scary environment to grow up in, especially for rangatahi who are just trying to fucking survive.
And man, of course, and then is the substances, is the easy access to alcohol, drugs, and the foods. You go to the neighborhoods, you go to the hoods, and then you see that there's much more KFC and other ways of feeding people than actually bringing the good things. We had a guest here explaining to us how alcohol is not an easy thing for Māori people to deal with, because Europeans it has been part of their culture for years and years, so the body is much more prepared, and then you put that into a population that is already struggling with health and a lot of other things, so it's even hard to bring them to the fight and say, hey, we got to pay attention to what we are consuming and how we're living. But you suffer with that every day, right? It's not the easiest thing.
Yeah. I grew up with alcohol and different types of substances around me growing up, it wasn't easy not understanding why my people in my space would drink, or who would turn to those types of substances as a little kid who just wanted love and affection, wanting to be held. Not having that consistently was, I think, a little bit confusing as a young person, like I said. I understand why whānau use alcohol or use violence or use drugs as a means to getting through life. I can only speak from my personal experience, but I understand that the reason why a lot of our whānau use alcohol, whether it's not socially, whether they're alcoholics, whether they use it fucking medically, different drugs. I understand all those different types of abuse are just outcomes of colonization and the lack of action, the lack of honouring te tiriti o Waitangi. As a youth in this space, I take a lot of notes from industry leaders that are trying to promote healthy lifestyles. I understand that if all that's getting you through the day and to stay on this earth is weed, then you do what you need to do. If all that's getting you through the day is using alcohol, then do what you need to do. And as soon as you're ready to make a change, as soon as you're ready to improve your hauora for yourself, for your whānau, for your hapu, for your iwi, then we can have that conversation. I see a lot of leaders framing no alcohol and no drug abuse as like the correct well-being or model to use health, model to look after your health, and it's quite a Pākehā view, a blanket binary, no, you cannot use, because I also know that these things can be enjoyed in moderation. I don't know.
Especially when you can talk about them, right? Especially when you are in a space that you can openly talk about them. When they're all prohibited, when you cannot even mention them in the school system, when you cannot even explain what's up, like you can, but there are parts, there are moments that you have to stop, and you're like, of course. And then, as you said, rules are made to be broken. So if you keep telling someone that you cannot do something, that's going to spark some curiosity there.
Yeah, and I think it's no surprise that rangatahi are using drugs or using alcohol, because look at the fucking state of the world. I wouldn't want to grow up in this. I wouldn't want to wish that on future generations coming through. And I feel like you just said was perfect, telling the rangatahi or not telling the rangatahi what are the impacts or how to use these things safely. It's not proper preventive. It's not a preventative health approach. It's not going to encourage them to think about their body. We've had conversations, the world has had conversations about like banning vapes or banning alcohol, but that's not going to decrease people using alcohol or drugs. It's just going to mean they're going to be using it in less safer ways. We have similar conversations about like abortions. If you ban abortions are still going to happen. They're just going to be more unsafe. If you ban something that you may perceive to be negative, whether you're religious, whether you're, anti-alcohol, it's not going to stop the thing from happening. It's just going to mean the people accessing it are going to be using it unsafer. They're going to be spending more money because alcohol has a higher tax on it. So it's going to be taking away money from their families. And there are so many like niche examples that I could pull from my personal experience. But yeah, what's good for all. What's good for Māori is good for all. I also acknowledge the Hāti mahi that has been done by Māori organisations, Marae up in Tāmaki Makaurau, where they're inviting whānau into their spaces, having open conversations with no shame, taking that shame away. You shouldn't be shamed to be an alcoholic. I don't know where the fuck that thought came from. I don't know how the fuck these Pākehā organisations are going to expect our communities, our whānau, to stop drinking if they're framing it as a bad thing or something that you should be shameful for. But just gentle approaches to well-being, to hauora well-being, I think is the way to go.
It is the way to go. I agree 100%. But man, as you said, it's young country. Colonization is very present still. So I feel like there's a lot of meditation that has to take part, like otherwise we go crazy, like you got, I think what you're doing is the best thing ever. You doing the work, being part of the change, like being the voice of the ones who cannot speak, like being there, being present. That's how we find peace, because it's slow. Whoever's in the power doesn't want to drop that bone, and that's why you need people facing them and saying, hey, calling them out. That's why it's so important. Love your shirts, by the way. Love your style.
Thank you. I have no idea where I fucking got it from. Paper Bag Princess, maybe? in Tamaki. It's very funky, very loud.
Yeah, for the people listening who cannot see you right now, you should check it out on YouTube. Yeah, colorful. Tell me about the moko.
The tamoko.
Tamoko.
Which one?
Well, I have to ask about the neck first because it looks like the most painful thing that someone could ever go through.
Yes.
I don't know, birth maybe women will tell me, but that looks pretty painful.
Yeah. I think as a general rule, let's not equate childcare birth to any other type of pain. You'll get in a lot of trouble.
Sorry.
Apology video coming soon. But yeah, my neck was done. Both my tamoko were one on my, is this a forearm? One on my arm and one on my neck that goes above my ears, and that was done by beautiful kaita tamoko artist called Leroy, and he works at Maya Inc. in Papakura. I got my arm first, so I think I'll start with that one. But what is on my arm is tamoko, an explanation of how I connect to my siblings. I've got power shell weaved throughout the piece to represent my connection to the ocean, to the whenua, to my ancestral waters. It looks pretty, but also has obviously heavy cultural significance. My mum going right through the middle with my siblings on either side and my beautiful nephew. And I need to add a new one because I've got a beautiful new niece, which is really cool. Really excited to be, what the fuck is a gender neutral term for uncle? Who cares? Uncle. But my neck piece was the most painful tattoo or tamoko that I've ever received, and I think I will ever receive. The conversation that I told Leroy was I wanted it to represent two different things. So on one side, the fact that all of our work should be for the next generation, that rangatahi are our future, and everything that we do should commit to improving the lives and well-being of the next generation, or the generation that exists currently. And the other side is sort of representing the fact that I'm just a tiny cog in a machine. I'm a part of the environment that is here to protect. It shouldn't be centered around me, but also it should be focused on the collective community that we're trying to support. There's a bigger picture. At the end of the day, there's always going to be a new day. Don't get stuck on one day. Don't let things hang you up. When you make mistakes, move on to the next one. We should always be learning, and all those type of cliche tick boxes. But over my ears, I don't know if you can see it with the...
You can remove the headphones.
With the headphones. Oh, that sounds a lot different. Is two taniwha that I had my beautiful partner Jack's design, and then Maya Inc. turned it into a tamoko piece. I wanted them to hang on me. I haven't given them names yet. I'm still waiting for something to jump out at me. But taniwha, the concept that they are, you could, I guess, understand it to be like a sea monster in the bottom of the moana, but in a lot of our stories in Te Ao Māori, we have taniwha that may be there to protect, maybe there to scare, maybe there to haunt, fuck knows, depending on where you're from in Aotearoa. By having those two taniwha with me, after getting this one, I've now jumped into, after getting my arm piece for those listening, I now work in different spaces. This was done last year. This was done this year. I wanted a taonga to protect me when I went and protested in Jamaica. A lot of my work is done through talking and through conversation and connecting with community, and I wanted people to see that my throat is very, very special. Things that I share, things that I understand, and yeah, that's where it's from. I think that answers your fucking question.
It does, yeah. It does. And the butterflies. So I got a couple. What was the artist's name? An artist. I got an artist to do some butterflies because my mum had a monarch butterfly on her back, but that wasn't why I got it. I just really like butterflies. And two of them, if you can see, have like a face. Oh yeah.
It's got like a little smiley face. I joke and I say during Pride Month that they're in a relationship. Stuart and Simon, they're in a relationship, but outside of Pride Month, they're just normal butterflies. But yeah, I want to get a tuna that goes around my arm in red ink. I think that'll look beautiful, and I want things swimming around me.
Nice.
Yeah.
What's coming up, man? What's for the future for Quack? Where do you want to be? What do you want to do?
Everyone keeps saying that I'm going to end up being a politician, and I really hope I don't, because they get treated like shit by people like me. But also I would love to keep working in community spaces with rangatahi. I'm moving to Te Whanganuiatara Pōneke, Wellington next year, well, in January, to move it with my partner, which is going to be really cool. I've never lived outside of Tāmaki Makaurau. I don't know what job I'm going to get. I don't know whether I'm going to work in the same spaces. I'm sure I'll have a new tāmoko to explain on the show. I'll have to come back in a year and we'll do the same conversation.
Yes, please.
But I have no idea what's in store for me. I've got some huge projects coming up. Like you said before, Mana Āniwaniwa is a kaupapa that I'm delivering, aimed to liberate takatāpui and queer people in Aotearoa through suicide prevention, whānau, through art activation, through all these random crazy things that I've got set up. But I'm gonna keep doing me, do my community mahi, keep making funny little TikToks, keep learning, keep understanding where people are coming from. And a large reason for me coming on this podcast is, as like we spoke about before, is that I'm sure there are many New Zealanders or many people in Aotearoa that have these questions that aren't necessarily born out of hate or homophobia. They just don't know where to look for that information. And I think with our conversation today, you've answered some really good partai that just aren't asked in the spaces that I'm in.
Yeah. Finding that confidence and being comfortable to ask those questions can be challenging as well. That's why I told you before, I'm like, my exercise is to own up to my ignorance. And I hope you're okay with it. Because sometimes you're scared. You're like, oh, that person is going to throw it at me or give me that look of like how stupid you are. So thank you for holding that space and for doing that. I feel like, especially with young people, like when you have this power of listening, of like, yeah, you tell me, I'll tell you what I know. I don't know at all, but we can find common grounds and see where we are. I always mention, because it's something that I found out that the Ministry of Education uses a lot, which is the teachings from Paulo Freire. He's a Brazilian educator in the 70s that made this beautiful study that like, you gotta get the ego out of the equation when you are an educator. You gotta come to a place understanding that each person in front of you knows something that you don't know, and you gotta find that connection first, so you know how to deliver something. You don't come with the voice of knowledge and I know
wisdom.
it all. You're gonna get nowhere, and that's why some kids say that some teachers suck, because they're not listening, they're not paying attention. So as someone who is connecting with such a broad audience, I think you're on the right path.
Thank you very much. Endorsed from ALTBAYS. Thank you very much.
Endorsed from ALTBAYS. And thank you. What a cool mission in the airplane, the shaky.
Yeah, the airplane from Barrier, from Tāmaki. I know they're a sponsor, but there was something that didn't sit right with my puku coming down. But
it's a small plane, eh? How was that?
It's very small. It was cool. I had to bend my neck to get on my seat, but I set all to myself. It was very cool. I took a time lapse. And because we were so low, I was able to like zoom up into everyone's houses. And I was like, whoa, this feels like an invasion of privacy. Felt like I was on like Google Maps. Like I was the Google Maps for a quick second, Google Street View. But
did it feel good?
It felt good.
Yeah.
It felt good.
That's the main thing. Yeah. Thank you so much. It means a lot to us. It's very important. The journey that we're going on is to chat, but obviously there are things that we believe in, and when we get someone with the knowledge and with the will, someone willing to share in a non-judgmental way, in an open way, it means a lot to us. It takes us to new places. So, kia ora.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to head back to Tāmaki on that very same shaky plane.
Yes, we'll bring you back.
Awesome.
Happy days. Go, we're coming to our show 200. It's been a cool mission. We got some cool things lined up, so stay with us. Ka kite.
Ka kite.
ALTBAYS.